I stood at the window, my hand still gripping the rusted shovel, as the snow erased every trace of the path I'd cleared this morning. Inside, my son's door slammed, rattling the frame like a gunshot. "You're useless. I hate living here." His words cut through the walls sharper than the cold outside. Useless. After 18 years of bills, sleepless nights, and scraped knees, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was the reason everything was wrong. Wait. Before we go any further, I gotta ask. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The snow hadn't let up all morning. Thick, wet flakes blanketed the steps, already hiding the effort Deb had made earlier with the rusted shovel. She stood at the front window, her fingers curled around the frayed edge of the curtain, watching it pile up again. The gray sky pressed down low, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it was. "Kyle!" she called over her shoulder, voice steady but already strained. "Can you help shovel the porch again?" She heard the video game controller clatter on the couch. Heavy footsteps thudded across the living room carpet. "For what?" Kyle snapped as he rounded the corner, hoodie half-zipped, hair wild, his face locked in that sneer he'd perfected since October. "So the mailman can walk 6 feet in comfort?" She turned from the window, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "So, we don't fall and crack our backs when we leave the house. It's just 10 minutes, Kyle." His nostrils flared. "You always do this. Every time I'm finally relaxing, you want something. Just shovel it yourself if it's so dangerous." Deb blinked, caught between anger and the sheer absurdity of arguing over snow. "I've already done it twice today. I'm just asking for a little help." Kyle's fists clenched. "You don't ask. You nag. You always have to make me feel like some lazy loser." "No one said that." She interrupted quietly, the mug of coffee in her hand trembling slightly. "You don't have to. This whole place, this whole life, it sucks." His voice rose now, ricocheting off the walls. "You're useless. I hate living here." Then he turned, storming off down the hall. The carpet muffled his steps until he reached his door. Slam. The sound hit like a gunshot. The vibration shook a picture frame off kilter. Silence dropped over the house like a curtain. Deb stood in the kitchen, motionless, her hand still around the ceramic mug. The coffee had gone cold long ago, forgotten somewhere between sunrise and the last unpaid bill. She stared down at it, numb. She didn't even flinch when her phone buzzed on the counter. "Angela, you okay?" Deb stared at the message. Her thumb hovered above the screen. A breath. Then another. She typed slowly. "Deb. Not anymore." She set the phone back down. Her fingers traced the rim of the mug as if trying to remember the last time warmth had come from it, or anything else. Somewhere down the hall, she could hear muffled music blasting through Kyle's door. Angry, thrashing guitars. She didn't recognize the song, but she knew the mood. She'd heard it before. The defiance. The shutdown. She closed her eyes for a second. The edge of exhaustion curled behind them like smoke. Her gaze drifted to the back door. Snow was building up there too, untouched. She thought about the rusted shovel leaning against the porch rail, about the freezer with only half a bag of chicken and a bottle of mustard left in it, about the school voicemail she hadn't returned, and about how long it had been since Kyle had looked her in the eye. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers. It didn't break, just landed with a dull thud on the linoleum, spilling the cold liquid across the floor like a lazy shadow. Footsteps sounded above her now. Pacing. Then a pause. Then the unmistakable click of Kyle's bedroom window sliding open. She froze. Not because she thought he might climb out, but because of what used to happen when his father did that same thing, slamming doors, cranking music, and letting the cold in like a weapon. Something shifted in her chest. She reached for the phone again. Not to text Angela. Not yet. This time, she scrolled past her contacts, past her recent calls, until her thumb stopped on one name she hadn't dialed in over a year. Her finger hovered, then pressed, ringing. The ringtone had long stopped. No voicemail, just silence. Deb sat on the edge of her bed, phone still in hand, her thumb pressing into the screen as if she could will it to connect. But the screen remained dark now, blank. No callback. No noise from Kyle's room either. Just the low hum of winter air seeping through old walls. She stood, suddenly restless, and crossed the room to the closet. Pushed aside the hanging clothes she hadn't worn in months, slacks that no longer fit, button-ups that once made her feel capable, and crouched down. There, in the far back corner, she reached under a stack of fleece blankets and pulled out the old fireproof box. It was heavier than she remembered. The click of the metal latches sounded loud in the small room. She opened it. Folders, receipts, photocopies of Kyle's birth certificate, the custody papers she thought she'd burned, tax returns from years she didn't want to remember. And near the bottom, folded neatly into a worn manila envelope, the deed, her name. Only her name. She stared at the document as if seeing it for the first time. It looked almost alien. Deborah Ann Monroe, sole owner of 114 Brookfield Drive. The mortgage had been paid off the year before Kyle started middle school. She'd done that, quietly. No celebration, no champagne, just a note in her budget planner and an extra breath of relief. She ran her finger over the typed letters. Her chest tightened, not with grief, but with something sharper. Recognition. Digging deeper, she pulled out a stack of old utility bills. Gas, electric, internet. Every one of them addressed to her. No cosigner, no second name, not his, never his. A sound behind her. Footsteps on the stairs. Fast. Heavy. Kyle, finally up. She heard the bathroom door open, slam shut. No words. No acknowledgement. She stood, tucked the deed under her arm, and carried it with her to the kitchen. The spilled coffee from last night had dried into a warped halo on the linoleum, sticky under her socks. She stepped over it, set the envelope on the counter. Kyle came down a few minutes later, hoodie up, earbuds in. A backpack slung half-heartedly over one shoulder. He moved with that same defiant slump, not even glancing her way as he grabbed a protein bar from the pantry. She opened her mouth to say something. Didn't. He didn't look at her, just walked out. No goodbye. Not even a slammed door this time. Just the brief creak of the screen door and the soft crunch of boots across snow. The quiet he left behind felt different than last night's. Less heavy. Almost hollow. Her phone buzzed again. Angela. Deb wiped her fingers on her sweatshirt and picked it up. Angela. You okay this morning? She stared at the screen. Then, slowly, deliberately, typed back. Deb. I want control back. She watched the 3 little dots blink, then stop. Angela. You've had it. You just forgot. Deb let the phone rest against her chest for a moment. The words burrowed deep. She looked again at the manila envelope sitting on the counter. The proof. The quiet, paper-bound truth of everything she had built and protected. Alone. Her eyes lifted to the wall clock. 8:04 a.m. She had 30 minutes before work started. And suddenly, a very different kind of plan began to form. Not rage, not revenge, not yet. But something quieter, more patient. She grabbed the envelope, turned, and headed for the hall closet. Inside, buried under winter coats and a bin of Christmas decorations, sat an old filing cabinet. She hadn't touched it in years, but she would now. She opened it, slid the envelope inside a fresh folder labeled Reset, and smiled for the first time in weeks. The bell over the hardware store door gave a tired jingle as Deb stepped inside, brushing snow off her sleeves. The heat hit her like a soft slap, dry and overworked, but the smell of wood shavings and motor oil settled into her lungs like something familiar, something solid. She blinked, adjusting to the yellow fluorescence, and stepped forward. "Morning," called a voice from behind the counter. "You're Deb, right? From the middle school?" Mark Barker. His hands were wrapped around a steaming travel mug, but he straightened when he saw her more clearly. "I did the lock on the nurse's cabinet last spring," he said, walking over. "You were there helping with flu shots. Kyle's mom, yeah?" She nodded. "That's me." Something in the way she said it made Mark pause. Not curt, not cold, just blank. He didn't press. "What can I help you with?" Deb exhaled, pulled off one glove, and reached into her coat pocket. She unfolded a small slip of paper. "I need to change out the locks. Deadbolts. Front and back. Maybe the basement too." Mark scanned the list. "You got keys floating around?" "No." Her voice didn't waver. "Just don't want who's inside thinking they're entitled to stay inside. Not without talking." Mark gave a small nod, thoughtful. "Got a kid being an ass?" Deb didn't answer. Didn't smile either. He didn't ask again. "All right. You'll want something heavy-duty, but not so fancy you're paying for bragging rights. Got just the thing." He disappeared down an aisle. Deb stayed where she was, listening to the muted rattle of keys on hooks and the occasional thud of snow sliding off the roof. Outside, the street looked washed out under a curtain of white. No plows yet. No footsteps. Mark returned with a boxed set of deadbolts, keys taped in plastic to the top. Matching set. Brushed nickel. Includes screws and strike plates. "I'll take it." He rang her up quietly. "You want install help?" "I can come by after lunch." Deb hesitated. "No, I've got someone." The screen door creaked open an hour later back at the house, and Angela stepped inside, stomping snow off her boots. "This is wildly satisfying," she said, holding up a cordless drill like a badge of honor. "You sure you're ready for this?" Deb was already unscrewing the first lock. "Past ready." They worked in a rhythm. Angela removed the old brass plates with confident clicks. Deb handled the deadbolts, fitting the smooth new cylinders into place like puzzle pieces. The sound of metal against wood was sharp, precise, clean. No wasted motion. No talk about Kyle. By the time they reached the back door, the sun was starting to dip, painting long gold slashes across the white backyard. Snow had picked up again, light but steady, casting a soft hush over everything. Angela held the new lock steady as Deb drilled the final screw in. "All right," Angela said, stepping back. Moment of truth. Deb reached into her pocket and pulled out the new key. It slid in smooth, turned clean. She locked it, then unlocked it again. They stood in silence for a beat, watching the doorknob rest in its new stillness, the click echoing like punctuation. Angela leaned against the doorframe. "You know, I keep thinking about what you said this morning, that you wanted control back." Deb wiped her palms on her jeans. "I wasn't asking permission." Angela smiled. "I know. That's why I came." The wind picked up outside. A gust threw a scatter of flakes across the back porch. And somewhere in the distance, a screen door creaked. Maybe a neighbor? Maybe not. Deb locked the door one last time and turned off the porch light. Inside the quiet, she opened the hallway closet again, pulled out the folder labeled Reset, and slid the new keys inside. All except one. That one she kept in her palm, tight and warm from her grip. Her gaze flicked toward the stairs. Still no word from Kyle. She pocketed the key and walked upstairs. By morning, the snow had turned powdery again, clean, deceptive, like a reset button she no longer believed in. Deb sat at the kitchen table, hands cupped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched, watching steam curl and vanish. The new keys lay beside it, one gleaming under the thin winter light. She turned it once in her fingers, the metal cool against her skin. No duplicates, no spares. The thought arrived like a verdict. Kyle wouldn't get one. She stood, quiet but certain, and opened the front closet. From the top shelf she pulled down an old cardboard box, one of the sturdy ones left over from when she packed away his father's things. She carried it to the living room, setting it on the coffee table, and began to fill it without ceremony. A hoodie, still smelling faintly of detergent. A tangle of gaming cords. A handful of notebooks from last semester. Pages warped from being left too close to the radiator. The more she packed, the lighter the room began to feel. When she was done, she taped the box shut, pressing hard along the seams until the sound of it snapping echoed through the house. Then she carried it to the front porch. The cold bit through her socks as she stepped outside. Setting the box neatly beside the doormat, she brushed snow from the top and stood there for a moment, breathing the sharp air, feeling something in her chest settle. From the driveway, the world was silent except for the soft hum of tires on distant streets. It would be hours before Kyle's bus came down Brookfield Drive. She went back inside, turned the new lock once, firm, final, and climbed the stairs. By 3 o'clock, the house felt too still, the kind of stillness that comes before impact. Deb sat on the edge of her bed, the same position as 2 mornings ago, hands clasped, staring at the phone on her nightstand. Angela had texted once around noon, "You holding steady?" And Deb had only sent back a thumbs up. She didn't need words for this part. At 3:22, she heard it, a distant crunch of boots. The scrape of a backpack dropped onto frozen steps, then the rattle of the doorknob. Click, click. A pause. Then the sound of it again, harder. And finally, thud. "Mom!" Kyle's voice, muffled but sharp, carried through the glass. "Mom, what the hell?" Another thud, this one shaking the window frame. "Open the door, I don't have my key." She moved to the window without thinking, pulling the curtain just enough to see him. He stood hunched against the cold, face flushed red beneath his hood, breath clouding the air. The box sat at his feet, already half covered in snow. He kicked it. Hard. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted, voice cracking in the thin air. "You changed the locks? You can't do that." Deb's fingers tightened on the curtain's edge. Her heartbeat sounded unnaturally loud in her ears. Kyle grabbed the handle again, shaking it violently. The metal rattled against the frame, desperate, angry. "Let me in." Deb said nothing. She didn't move. For a moment he stopped pounding, looked up, not quite seeing her behind the curtain, but sensing her there. The silence stretched. His breath came in ragged bursts. Then his shoulders dropped. He turned, shoving the hood back over his head, and stomped down the steps. He grabbed the box, muttering something she couldn't hear, and started down the sidewalk. Deb followed his shape through the window as he made his way toward the corner, toward Angela's house. Snow was falling again, fat flakes drifting sideways in the wind. When he reached her porch, he rang the bell once. Then again. He waited. No light came on inside. No movement behind the blinds. He pounded harder. "Angela, it's me. Come on." Nothing. Deb watched him slump against the railing, breath coming out in white clouds. His anger dimmed, replaced by something smaller. Confusion, maybe. Hurt. He looked back once toward the house, toward her window, but she didn't move the curtain. After a long minute, he pulled his hood up again and walked off into the slow falling snow. Deb stayed by the window until he vanished into the blur of white. Only then did she whisper to herself, barely audible, more exhale than sound. Never again. She let the curtain fall shut, and somewhere downstairs, the new deadbolt clicked softly in the settling heat, like the house agreeing with her. The call came just after sunset. Deb was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate motions when her phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a name she didn't expect. Mr. Sue. Tobin? School counselor. She hesitated, watching the vibration rattle against the wood. Then she answered. Mrs. Monroe. He began gently, voice measured, the way people speak when they're not sure what they're walking into. I just wanted to check in. Kyle came to see me today. Her hand tightened around the dish towel. Did he? Yes, Tobin said after a pause. He was upset. He said there's been some tension at home. He mentioned being locked out. Said you've been acting. He coughed softly, searching for a word that wouldn't sting. Different. Deb leaned against the counter, staring at the dark window over the sink. Her reflection looked back at her, calm, steady, older than she remembered. He said abuse, didn't he? The line went quiet for a second. Then, he did. Deb exhaled. No outrage, no tears. Just air leaving her lungs in a slow stream. Then you should come over. I'm sorry? Come see for yourself, Mr. Tobin. Tonight, if you can. There was hesitation on the other end, a faint rustle of papers. Mrs. Monroe, I don't mean to intrude. You won't be intruding, she said evenly. You'll be seeing what he didn't tell you. When Tobin arrived an hour later, the snow had thickened again. He stood awkwardly on the porch, scarf tucked up to his chin, clipboard pressed against his coat. Deb opened the door before he could knock twice. Thanks for coming, she said, stepping aside. The warmth of the house hit him immediately. The scent of lemon cleaner and brewed tea. Nothing chaotic. Nothing out of place. Deb led him through the narrow hallway toward the stairs. You might want to start upstairs. He followed quietly, his shoes creaking against the wood. At the top, she pushed open Kyle's bedroom door. The smell hit first. Stale energy drinks, sweat, and something burnt from the space heater half hidden under the desk. The walls told the rest. Chunks of drywall torn out near the bed. A hole the size of a fist beside the light switch. The thermostat on the hallway wall cracked down the middle. The dial snapped clean off. Tobin's face paled as he took it in. Good Lord. He gets angry, Deb said simply. Not just with me, with the walls, the air, anything that tells him no. Tobin crouched beside the broken thermostat, his breath fogging slightly in the chill from the open window. Did you document this? I did. She handed him her phone. A gallery of photos, not just of the room, but the door downstairs with splintered edges, the dent in the refrigerator, the shattered frame of a picture that used to hang in the hallway. Each image time-stamped. Methodical. Tobin scrolled slowly. You didn't call anyone? I did once, Deb said quietly. Last year. They said he was just adjusting. Typical teenage frustration. He looked up at her. This isn't typical. No, she said. It isn't. They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the furnace filling the space. Then Tobin closed his notepad. I'll need to make a report. I think Kyle needs more help than the school can give. Deb nodded once. That's what I've been saying. He hesitated at the door, hat in his hand. You've been patient with him. Too patient. When the door closed behind him, Deb stayed in the foyer for a long while, listening to the wind against the glass. She wasn't shaking. She thought she might, but instead, she felt an almost physical steadiness, like her body was finally aligning with what her mind had known for months. She turned off the porch light and went to her desk in the corner of the living room. A small lamp lit the space, warm against the dark. She slid open a drawer and took out a folder marked Reset, the one she'd created days ago. Inside, tucked between the deed and the spare keys, was a new card. Rachel Tran, attorney at law. The card felt heavier than it should. Deb dialed. The line picked up on the second ring. Rachel Tran speaking? It's Deb Monroe, she said steady. I have a situation I'd like to document. All right, the woman replied briskly. Start from the beginning. I already did, Deb said. I just need someone to help me finish it. Rachel's voice softened. Then you've come to the right person. Deb looked once more toward the stairs, the faint hum of Kyle's empty room above her. Then she opened her phone, selected photos, and began sending each image one by one into Rachel Tran's inbox. The screen glowed white against her hands as snow thickened outside, blanketing everything in quiet. The envelope was heavier than paper should be. Deb slid it across the counter at the courthouse with a finality that made the clerk look up. The woman skimmed the top page, then nodded and pulled a stamp from a metal drawer. With one solid thunk, the process began. Notice to vacate, 30 days, the clerk said. You'll get confirmation when it's served. Outside, the wind had teeth. Deb zipped her coat all the way to her chin and walked toward her car with steps that didn't falter once. It was a Tuesday when Kyle got served. During fourth period, a uniformed court officer walked into his social studies class with a white envelope and a flat voice. Kyle Monroe? Heads turned. Kyle sat back, blinking like he hadn't heard right. Please step into the hallway. A half-second later, he stood, pushing his chair back harder than necessary, the metal legs shrieking against the tile. He followed the officer out, already scowling. The envelope was handed over without ceremony. Official. Cold. His name typed in bold above the phrase, Petition for Recovery of Premises. Residential eviction. By the time the bell rang, Kyle had already fired off 3 texts. You're actually doing this? You'll regret this. You think I won't fight back? Just wait. Deb read them in the school parking lot, where she'd been sitting since lunch, hands still on the wheel, waiting for something. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, to return. Neither came. She silenced her phone and drove home. The house smelled like cinnamon when she walked in. Angela stood at the stove, pulling a loaf of warm bread from the oven. She glanced over her shoulder. How'd it go? Deb hung up her coat slowly. Served during class. Angela gave a satisfied nod, then gestured to the counter. I made your favorite. Thought it might help. Deb stared at the bread. Crisp crust, sugar-dusted edges, steam rising from a crack down the center. Angela sliced 2 pieces, laid one on each plate, then slid Deb's toward her. He had this coming, Angela said. You gave him every chance. Deb sat down. She didn't argue, didn't pretend there was still something to salvage. The silence between them was warm, companionable, the way it used to be before everything started unraveling. They ate without speaking further. Later that night, Angela left with a soft goodbye and a promise to check in tomorrow. Deb watched her taillights disappear down the street, then locked the door with quiet, precise clicks. The house felt too large now. Every floorboard seemed louder. Every shadow stretched longer. She didn't go upstairs. Instead, Deb moved through the first floor slowly, turning off lights one by one. She paused at the bottom of the staircase, listening for footsteps. There were none. Kyle hadn't come home. At least, not yet. In her bedroom, Deb did something she hadn't done in years. She locked the door. The sound of the bolt sliding into place sent a jolt through her spine. Not fear, exactly. Something colder, sharper. The room held a stillness that felt earned. The bed was made, the lamp beside it casting a soft gold light across the hardwood. She hadn't slept soundly in weeks, but tonight there was no stomping above her head. No slamming doors, no muffled shouting through thin walls. She changed into flannel pajamas and sat on the edge of the mattress, brushing her hair with slow, mechanical movements. On the nightstand sat the folder marked Reset, the same one she'd shown Rachel Tran. Deb picked it up again, removed one paper at a time, the lease, the photos, the letter Rachel helped her draft to the court. Each page was its own line in the sand. She tucked everything back inside and slid it under the bed. Then she turned off the light. It was just past midnight when her phone lit up again. No buzz, just a silent notification glowing on the screen. Video message, Kyle Monroe. The preview image showed only a grainy, low-lit frame, Kyle outside somewhere, his face half-shadowed, hoodie pulled tight, snow swirling behind him. The video was only 10 seconds long. She didn't open it. Not yet. Deb sat up, heart steady. She reached down, pulled the reset folder back into the light, and laid it flat on her lap, waiting, breath held, for whatever came next. The shatter came just before dawn. Not loud, but sharp. A single crack, like the snap of a bone. Deb was already half awake, still in bed, the reset folder unopened on her lap. The glow of the streetlights bled through the curtains. Then came the sound of wind, real and wrong, pushing through where it shouldn't. She rose, slow but sure, pulled on her robe, and stepped out of the room. The cold hit her first, sharp through the hallway, slicing along the floorboards. She followed it to the living room. Glass crunched under her slippers. The window by the couch, the one facing the side yard, was fractured inward, a jagged hole surrounded by glittering shards and curling frost. A rock, wrapped in a flannel sleeve, sat on the carpet, damp from melted snow. Deb stared at it. No panic. Just the confirmation of a truth she'd already counted on. She turned and called 911. The squad car arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, one older, tired-eyed, the other barely out of his academy years, took in the scene with practiced calm. Anyone hurt? No, Deb said, arms folded over her chest. No one's inside. You recognize who did this? The older officer asked. She didn't blink. Kyle Monroe, my son. The younger cop scribbled quickly in his notepad. You want to press charges? I want it on record, she replied, level as stone. I'm not pretending anymore. They asked for a photo. She provided one from last spring. Kyle in his track hoodie, before his eyes turned unfamiliar. He's 17? 18 in 2 months. The officer nodded. We'll file the report. You'll get the case number within the hour. As they left, the wind pressed harder through the broken pane. Angela came by at 9 a.m. with plywood in her back seat and a cordless drill slung under her arm. She didn't knock. Figured I'd beat the glass guys by a few days, she said, stepping over the shattered pieces. Jesus, Deb. Deb handed her gloves. I'll hold while you drill. They worked in silence, not solemn, but steady. Sawdust and metal filings clung to their sleeves. The plywood smelled raw and rough cut. When it was done, Angela stood back, hands on her hips. You should have told me he was escalating. I didn't want to make him worse, Deb admitted. Turns out silence does that just fine. Angela nodded. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. Mark showed up by late afternoon with a reinforced locking system and the same quiet focus he used when fixing irrigation in the spring. This one's deadbolt with a steel core. Plate reinforcement too. I'll get you set up on all exterior doors. Deb offered him coffee. He declined, but smiled. The first real expression she'd seen in days that didn't carry weight. By sunset, every entry point clanked when it closed. Secure in a way the house hadn't felt in years. Mark handed her the keys. If he comes back again, the door's not where he's getting in. She held the key ring in her palm like it mattered, because it did. That evening, Deb walked down the block to the old green utility shed that served as the neighborhood watch post. The community bulletin board sat beneath a dull overhead light, surrounded by flyers for babysitters and missing cats. She pinned up a photo of Kyle, printed in color and labeled with the words, "Do not approach, known to be volatile. If seen, call 911. It felt brutal. It felt necessary. She stepped back and looked at it. Her son's face, public now, the weight of her choice fixed in staples and paper. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. A neighbor, Mr. Harrell, 2 houses down, stood with his dog on a leash. He looked at the photo, then at her. "That him?" he asked. "Yes." Harrell gave a low whistle. "All right, we'll keep our eyes open." As Deb turned to leave, her phone buzzed again. New voicemail, unknown caller, no transcript. Just static and silence on the screen. She didn't play it, but she saved it. For the record. The envelope came by certified mail, thick with the kind of paper that means trouble. Rachel Tran was the first to read it. Deb sat across from her at the attorney's office, the smell of stale coffee and printer toner clinging to the air. Rachel flipped the last page and sighed softly through her nose. "Juvenile petition," she said. "He's claiming unlawful eviction. Filed through the county's youth advocate office." Deb's lips pressed into a line. "He's got help now?" "Someone's helping him fill out forms," Rachel said. "That doesn't mean it's valid." Deb looked out the window where sleet rattled faintly against the glass. "I did everything by the book." "I know," Rachel said, firm. "You documented everything. Photos, texts, damage reports, police statements. He can file whatever he wants. Doesn't mean he wins." Deb slid a folder across the desk, the same one she'd labeled Reset. The cover was worn at the edges, the paper inside creased from being handled too often. Rachel opened it, spread out the contents like evidence on a courtroom table. Photos of holes punched through drywall. Messages that read, "You'll regret this." The notice to vacate stamped and dated. The police report from the broken window. It was all there. The slow accumulation of chaos turned into proof. "Good," Rachel said. "This isn't about punishing him. It's about drawing the line and not stepping back." Deb nodded, her voice quiet but certain. "That's what I stopped doing. Stepping back." The municipal courtroom was smaller than she expected. Rows of empty chairs, the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint clack of a bailiff's shoes echoing off linoleum. The flag in the corner drooped slightly, too heavy for its pole. Deb sat on one side of the room, Rachel beside her, a neat stack of folders aligned on the table. Across from them, Kyle slouched in a borrowed blazer, hair longer than before, face drawn in pale defiance. He didn't look at her. When the judge entered, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched low and a voice that cut through the quiet. Everyone stood. "Case number 28334, she read from the docket. "Kyle Monroe versus Deborah Monroe. Petition alleging unlawful eviction and parental neglect." Deb's throat went dry at the words parental neglect. But she didn't move, didn't speak. Rachel rose smoothly. "Your Honor, the respondent has provided complete documentation supporting her lawful actions under Minnesota Statute 504B 285. Kyle's advocate, a young legal aide in a Navy suit, stood next. His voice was measured but uncertain. "My client maintains that he was not provided adequate time or alternative housing." The judge nodded, eyes flicking between them. "We'll review the evidence. Mr. Monroe, you'll have a chance to speak." When Deb's turn came, Rachel handed her a prepared statement. 1 page, typed in clean lines. Deb held it steady, though her fingers trembled slightly at the edges. She looked up before reading. Kyle's knee was bouncing under the table, a rhythm of agitation she remembered from every argument they'd ever had. "I stopped enabling abuse," Deb began. Her voice was calm, the kind that carried because it didn't waver. "I stopped mistaking patience for love. My son isn't homeless. He's refusing to live by any rule that isn't his own. I gave him time, help, and boundaries. He broke all 3. She looked at the judge, then down at her paper. This isn't revenge, it's recovery. The courtroom was silent except for the hum of the lights. Rachel rested a hand briefly on her arm before sitting. When it was Kyle's turn, he avoided the judge's eyes. His advocate whispered something, but he only muttered under his breath. "I just wanted my stuff," he said finally, voice cracking. "She locked me out." The judge leaned forward. "Did you attempt to retrieve your belongings through lawful channels, Mr. Monroe?" He hesitated. I texted her. Any response?" He swallowed. "She didn't answer." Rachel rose. "Your Honor, my client was advised not to engage after receiving direct threats." Kyle's eyes flicked toward her then. Brief, bitter, almost scared. The judge adjusted her glasses, gaze steady on him. "Young man, this isn't a criminal hearing, but I'll say this plainly. You don't get to destroy a home and then claim ownership of it." Kyle said nothing. After a few more questions, the judge sat back, signed a page, and handed it to the clerk. "This court finds no evidence of unlawful eviction," she said. "Ms. Monroe acted within her legal rights. All custodial and financial responsibilities are hereby terminated." The gavel dropped once, a sound that felt heavier than any scream. Outside, the sky was an unbroken gray. Rachel shook Deb's hand. "You did the hardest thing a parent can do. You told the truth, and you let it stand." Deb exhaled. "I don't feel victorious." "You're not supposed to," Rachel said. "You just feel free." They parted at the courthouse steps. Deb stood there for a moment, wind tugging at her coat, when her phone buzzed again. A single notification. Video message, Kyle Monroe, unopened. This one didn't show his face, just a grainy shot of the house, her porch light glowing faintly against the dusk. She stared at the screen. Then, without opening it, she hit Save Evidence and started walking toward her car. The first real snow stuck the morning Mr. Saw Arson Tobin called. Deb was folding towels in the laundry room, warm air venting from the floor grate when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. She'd been training herself to ignore unknown numbers, but his name still flashed on the screen in familiar letters. "Deborah," he began. "I hope I'm not overstepping." She braced herself. Apologies, maybe. Or worse. Second-guessing. But Tobin's voice was different this time. Not hesitant. Just quiet. "I've been following the hearing. And what happened at school. I want you to know, I think you did the right thing." Deb didn't speak. Let the silence answer. "There's a workshop I'm involved with. Parenting resilience. Mostly for moms who've dealt with behavioral trauma in the home. Would you ever consider speaking?" Deb leaned against the dryer, feeling its low hum through her back. "I wouldn't know what to say." "You already said it," he replied. "You stopped enabling abuse." Angela showed up 2 days later with a casserole dish covered in foil and a Google spreadsheet printed and highlighted. "Okay," she said, not bothering to wait for an invitation in. "We've got Mondays and Thursdays filled with hot meals. Tuesdays are for frozen drop-offs. Janine makes a mean chicken pot pie. You'll love her." Deb blinked. "What is this?" "Meal train," Angela said, breezing past her into the kitchen. "You're on the receiving end. It's your turn." Deb opened the fridge to make room. Inside, tubs of yogurt Kyle had demanded and never touched were still stacked in the back. She stared at them a moment, then pulled them all out and placed them on the counter. Angela looked over. "You okay?" "I think I'm finally starting to be." Rachel emailed the next morning. The subject line read, "Introduction, Family Advocacy Circle, Lowertown Chapter." In the body, a brief note, "Thought of you. They don't just support, they organize. No pressure. But it's a room full of women who get it." The link opened to a homepage with simple language and smiling faces. But it was the mission statement that made Deb pause. We build boundaries that don't bend under guilt. She signed up for their January meetup. Later that week, Deb boxed up 3 bags of food: frozen waffles, microwavable burritos, untouched cartons of chocolate milk. All the things Kyle had once demanded and then left to expire. She drove them to the local pantry, a low brick building next to the public library. A volunteer with gray curls and a clipboard met her at the door. "Got some extras?" "Too many," Deb said, lifting the bags. "Just couldn't throw them out." The woman nodded as she took them. "It'll feed a dozen kids this week. Nothing goes to waste here." Nothing wasted. Deb almost smiled. That Saturday, Mark came by in a work jacket and utility gloves, a box of motion sensor cameras tucked under one arm. "I got extras from a job downtown," he said. "Didn't like the thought of you here without eyes on the outside." She tried to protest. "You've done enough." "Nope," he said, opening his toolbox. "You're letting us help. That's the new deal." He installed one above the garage, another near the back door, and a third facing the street. Each one beamed live to her phone, a small icon now added to her screen. "You ever feel off?" he said, testing the last one. "This'll remind you you're not alone." That night, Deb sat by the living room window, a mug of tea in her hand, watching the snow fall in soft sheets. The plywood was still up on the broken window, but it no longer felt like a wound. More like a placeholder. Something temporary. Something healing. She didn't jump at sounds anymore. She didn't wait for footsteps overhead. She didn't reread Kyle's messages or hover her thumb over play. Instead, she pressed Arm System on her new home security app. The chime confirmed it. Safe. Secured. Still. She was halfway up the stairs when her phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: Incoming court filing. Monroe v. Monroe. Civil damages. Her hand froze on the banister. Another case. Another round. But this time she turned back toward her desk. Slow, unshaken, and reached for the reset folder like it was armor. Because now she had something she hadn't before. A village behind her. The diner still smelled like fry grease and scorched coffee. Deb stepped inside and instantly felt it. The tug of memory, the kind that lives low in the body. Vinyl booths. A slow-turning ceiling fan. That syrupy hum of the jukebox in the corner. Tom was already there. Back booth. Hands folded on the table like a preacher pretending to listen. He looked older. The beard was streaked with gray now. The gut softer. But the smirk hadn't aged a day. It still curled at the edges like he knew more than he was saying. Deb walked over without hesitation. "You look good," he said, standing halfway like it was still his place to greet her. "Real good." "Let's not pretend," she replied, sliding into the booth across from him. "I'm not here for compliments." Tom chuckled, sat. "Fair enough." The waitress came and poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs without asking. Deb didn't touch hers. He did. 2 sugars. No cream. Same as always. "I heard about Kyle," he began, voice low and rehearsed. "Court stuff. Police. It's gotten ugly." She said nothing. Tom leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "I figured maybe it's time I step up. Help out. Maybe take some of the pressure off." Deb's stare didn't waver. "By doing what, exactly?" "I mean, joint custody. Supervised visits, if that's easier. Or just helping with the bills. Child support. Retroactive, maybe." She actually laughed, a short, dry sound. "You walked out when he was 3, she said. No calls, no birthday cards, not a single dime." Tom shrugged, too casual. "I wasn't ready. Doesn't mean I can't be now." "You weren't ready, or you didn't care?" His smile faltered just a notch. "Hey, let's not rehash all that. You and I both made mistakes." Deb's jaw tightened. "Don't lump us in together. You didn't make a mistake, Tom. You made a decision, and you kept making it, Every day, you stayed gone. He leaned back, slow. You're really not going to let me be part of his life? She shook her head. There's no version of this where you show up now and rewrite history. You don't get to be the rescue plan. Tom's expression hardened. You know, if you keep pushing people away, it's no wonder the kids screwed up. She didn't flinch. Try saying that in court, she said calmly. See how that plays? His tone changed, just a little colder, more calculated. I could file for custody. Maybe I don't win, but I make your life hell for 6 months. Maybe more. Deb finally reached for her mug. Didn't drink, just held it, like grounding wire. Then she smiled. Not warm, not cruel, just ready. You already did, she said, 15 years ago. And I survived it. Tom looked at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time, and for once, he didn't say anything. By that afternoon, Rachel had the draft ready. Emergency protective order, she said, sliding it across her desk. Restrains contact, includes Kyle by default, and will cite emotional coercion and past abandonment for context. Deb scanned the page. Do you think he'll actually try to file anything? Rachel leaned back. If he does, this is the first move. If he doesn't, it stays on record. Either way, it's a line in the sand. Deb signed without hesitating. The pen moved smoothly across the paper, her name now anchoring a new boundary. That night, Deb stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, Kyle's old room. The door was open, the air still. She hadn't entered since the window broke. She stepped in slowly. The walls still bore scars, dents, patches of unpainted spackle, the cracked frame of a poster still dangling crookedly. She opened the closet. Empty now, except for a single worn sweatshirt folded on the shelf. She reached for it, held it for a moment, then dropped it in the donation box waiting by the door. Her phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. He's not going to save you either. Deb stared at the words, then took a screenshot. Saved it. Filed it into a new folder on her phone, labeled Next. The new cameras blinked red in the corners like small mechanical eyes. Deb stood in the doorway as Mark packed up his drill, his hands red from the cold. That's full perimeter now, he said. Motion triggered, infrared, all feed to your phone, plus cloud backup. If anything moves within 50 feet, you'll know. She nodded, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater. Thank you, Mark. He gave her a look, quiet but firm. This isn't charity. It's what people do when they mean it. After he left, Deb walked the perimeter herself. Front door, garage, side yard, back patio. She tested each camera angle through her app, the feed crystal clear even in the fading light. Her house no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a fortress. It was just after 2:30 a.m. when the alert came. Motion detected. Front porch. Deb's eyes snapped open. She sat up, already reaching for her phone. The feed was dark, the porch light catching snowflakes like static. Then he stepped into frame. Kyle. Hood up. Hands in pockets. Leaner than before, twitchy. Like he didn't know what to do now that someone was watching. She didn't wait. She hit call police through the app. Then she went to the hallway, locked her bedroom door, and waited, standing, alert, hand on her phone. Less than 10 minutes later, red and blue lights strobed across the window panes. By the time she cracked open the front door, Kyle was standing against the cruiser, arms crossed tightly across his chest, jaw clenched. One of the officers turned toward her. We gave him a warning. He's not to return. Any contact, he goes in. Deb stepped out into the cold, robe tight around her. Do I need to press charges now? The officer shook his head. Not yet. But we'll make a report. You did the right thing calling it in immediately. Kyle glanced at her then. No rage, no pleading, just hollow disbelief, like he couldn't believe she was the one drawing the line. She didn't say a word, just met his stare until he dropped it. By morning, Rachel had sent out cease and desist letters by certified mail. One to Kyle, one to Tom. The language was precise. Any further uninvited contact will be considered harassment and pursued accordingly under Minnesota statute. Deb read them over breakfast. Her coffee had gone cold, but she drank it anyway. It no longer mattered how it tasted. It mattered that it was hers. Angela arrived that afternoon with an overnight bag and a baseball bat. "I'm not letting you sleep here alone," she said, tossing the bag on the couch. "I snore. You'll deal." "I'm not scared," Deb replied. Angela gave her a sideways look. Good. But scared or not, backup helps. They made grilled cheese, shared a bottle of wine, talked about everything except Kyle, Tom, or the courts. Just two women rebuilding a sense of normal. By midnight, Angela had taken the guest room, and Deb stood alone at the front door, watching snow swirl under the porch light. She didn't turn it off. She left it glowing. Soft. Steady. Warm. Not for Kyle. Not for Tom. For her. To say she lived here. To say she wasn't hiding. At 3:07 a.m., another alert. But this time, it wasn't the front door. Motion detected. Backyard, south window. Deb's breath caught in her chest. She sat up, opened the app. Nothing moved. Just the wind stirring frost across the patio. She clicked rewind. Frame by frame. Then, a shadow. Passing quick. Too fast to identify. But there. And then gone. She saved the clip. Filed it to her folder labeled Next. Opened a new subfolder beneath it. Now. Then she got up and reached for the bat Angela had left propped by the front door. The halls of Jackson High were quieter than Deb remembered. No morning rush. No lockers slamming. Just a low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of disinfectant masking something sour underneath. Mr. Tobin met her at the reception desk. He gave a small nod and gestured toward his office. "Thanks for coming," he said, closing the door behind them. Deb sat in the same vinyl chair she had months ago, the one that used to squeak when she shifted. Today, she didn't move. Tobin folded his hands on the desk. "I figured you should hear it from me directly. Kyle hasn't been attending classes regularly. His name's still on the roster, but—" He hesitated, like he was trying to phrase something gently. "But he's not coming," Deb finished for him. Tobin nodded. "From what I've heard, through a few students, he's been couch surfing. Mostly with some older kids who aged out last year. Not a stable setup." Deb didn't ask for names, didn't ask where. She just nodded once. "Would you like to keep him enrolled?" Tobin asked. She looked at the framed photos on his bookshelf, past graduates, yearbook group shots, smiles that looked heavier now. "No," she said. "I think we're past that." He reached for a form, slid it across the desk. "Standard withdrawal paperwork. You'll be listed as the one initiating it. It helps us close the loop on our end." She took the pen, signed her name in steady, even strokes. No tears, just ink and finality. Afterward, she stopped by the front office. A secretary in a red cardigan greeted her with a surprised smile. "Mrs. Monroe, good to see you." "I've got a few things," Deb said, setting down a cardboard box. Inside were unopened spiral notebooks, a graphing calculator still in the plastic, packs of mechanical pencils, and one untouched binder with Kyle scrawled across the cover in faded Sharpie. The secretary glanced inside, then up at her. "These are new." "He never used them," Deb replied. "Maybe someone else will." The woman gave a soft smile. "They'll go fast. We always have kids who come in empty-handed." Deb didn't say anything. Just nodded and left. Angela met her back at the house with 2 cups of coffee and a toolkit. "You sure you're ready?" she asked, standing in the hallway outside Kyle's room. Deb sipped her coffee and stared at the door. He made it clear he doesn't live here anymore. Angela handed her a pair of latex gloves like they were about to investigate a crime scene. Let's begin. They opened the door. The smell hit first. Not foul, just stale. Old cologne. Sweat sealed into the fabric of a life unfinished. The bed was stripped. A few socks were still balled in the corner. The closet was empty now, save for wire hangers clinking softly when the door opened. Angela pulled open the desk drawer and whistled. Still has a whole stack of late slips in here. Deb pulled down a poster from the wall, rolling it slowly. He always said he hated this room. Well, let's make it into something no one can hate. They moved through the space slowly, not mourning, not angry, just untying knots. Angela held up a cracked ceramic lamp. Trash or donate? Trash, Deb said. Anything with sharp edges goes. Angela laughed. God, that's a metaphor. They cleared the bookshelves, packed old sneakers into donation bags, and pulled the scuffed area rug off the floor. The carpet underneath was flattened and stained in places. Sky blue, Angela said suddenly, looking around. Deb raised a brow. What? The walls. This room's dark as hell. Let's paint it sky blue. Fresh start, yeah? Deb stared at the walls, their chipped edges and smeared thumbtack holes. Sky blue, she said quietly. Yeah, I like that. Later that night, Deb sat on the edge of her bed, paint chips fanned out across her lap. She felt light. Tired in a good way, like work had replaced worry. Her phone buzzed. A new email. No subject, no sender. She opened it. A single attachment. No message. She tapped the file. It was a photo. Her backyard. Taken from inside a car. From the street. Deb's breath went still. She looked again at the timestamp. 11:03 a.m., while she'd been at the school. Downtown was glassy with sleet. Salt trucks hummed past the courthouse, spraying sand that crackled under tires like crushed bone. Deb parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, hood up, gloved hands deep in her coat pockets. Rachel was already inside the law office, waiting with a manila folder spread open between 2 mugs of coffee. Timeline, she said, without preamble. Start to finish. Deb sat across from her. Her shoulders dropped a fraction as she exhaled. Rachel slid over a legal pad with sections marked in bold. Abandonment, age 3. No contact, 11 years. First attempted custody. Filing, rejected. Cease and desist issued, 3 weeks ago. We build the case like a staircase, Rachel said, tapping her pen. One step leads to the next. You're not proving he's a bad man. You're proving he was never a father. Deb nodded, tracing the timeline with her eyes. He thinks DNA gives him rights. Rachel looked up. It doesn't. Not when he's 15 years late to the starting line. They worked in silence for an hour, refining phrasing, pulling up screenshots, attaching timestamps. Deb handed over the photo from her backyard. Rachel added it to the folder without comment, but her eyes tightened. Want me to subpoena surveillance from nearby homes? Yes. Done. When they finished, Rachel closed the folder and pushed it toward Deb. Final say, as always. This is your life, not just your case. Deb ran her fingers along the folder's edge. I never thought I'd be fighting for the right to be done. Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Every woman I work with says the same thing. The hearing was mercifully short. The judge, same woman from the previous juvenile petition, glanced over the documents with swift, practiced authority. Mr. Thomas Everett Monroe is requesting partial paternal rights for his biological son, Kyle James Monroe, aged 17 years and 9 months. She read from the file. Tom stood on the other side of the courtroom, hair slicked back, suit too sharp for someone trying to play the good guy. Deb didn't look at him. Not once. Rachel stood. Your Honor, we are submitting a timeline of non-participation, financial neglect, and lack of emotional presence going back nearly 15 years. My client has solely supported and raised Kyle Monroe since age 3, with no aid, contact, or interest from the petitioner until the last 60 days. Tom's lawyer, thinner and less seasoned than Rachel, tried to rebut. Mr. White, Monroe was not provided opportunities to re-engage earlier. He was led to believe he was unwelcome. Rachel didn't even blink. There is no record of any outreach until after Mr. Monroe became aware of Kyle's legal trouble and my client's recent filing for legal independence. The judge held up the stack of printed exhibits, photos, texts, withdrawal forms, court notices. She turned to Tom. Mr. Monroe, do you have any physical proof of contact with your son between ages 3 and 17? Tom cleared his throat. No, but... Do you have any history of financial contributions? Legal custody filings? Even a birthday card? He shook his head. The judge set the stack down. Then your petition is denied in full. Tom's jaw clenched. His lawyer leaned in, whispered something Deb couldn't hear. She stood as the gavel dropped. The final thud felt like a door closing. That afternoon, back at the house, the kitchen table was covered in paperwork again. But not legal folders. A will. The one Deb had written the year Kyle turned 10, when she still believed in second chances. She crossed out his name in thick black ink. The pen didn't hesitate once. Angela stood beside her, watching quietly. I hate that it came to this, Deb said, voice low but certain. Angela reached for the witness line, signed her name with a steady hand. You did more than most ever would. Deb nodded. I'm not angry, I'm just done handing over pieces of myself to people who only want them when they're convenient. They both looked at the empty line where Kyle's name had been. Angela folded the will and slid it into the manila envelope. Let's paint the room tomorrow. Sky blue, Deb said, with white trim. That night, Deb lit a single candle on the windowsill. Not for ritual, not for memory, for light. Because she was finally living in a house where the only shadow left was behind her. The call came from a number she didn't recognize. Again. Only this time, it wasn't a voicemail or a text with no name, just a clipped, professional voice on the other end. This is St. Luke's Medical Center. Is this Deborah Monroe? She paused. Yes. You're listed as next of kin for Kyle Monroe. He's stable, but he was brought in this morning. Exposure and a mild concussion. No ID on him. Only his name. Deb didn't speak. Ma'am? I understand, she said. I'll come. She hung up without asking what had happened, without asking who had found him, or what sidewalk he'd collapsed on, or how long he'd been out in the cold. She just changed clothes, tied her boots, and drove into town. The hospital was awash of fluorescent light and muffled coughs. Deb moved through it like a ghost, her boots leaving melting snow in her wake. At the front desk, a nurse guided her to a curtained room in the ER wing. He's awake, the nurse said quietly, but he's not talking. Not surprised. The curtain parted with a soft swish. Kyle was lying on a narrow hospital bed, IV taped to the back of one hand, a bandage above his right eyebrow. His hair was damp, matted. His lips were cracked. He didn't look at her. Didn't even twitch. Deb stood in the doorway for a long moment. The monitor beeped softly behind him, a metronome of borrowed time. She stepped in. Just one step. You're alive? She said. Not cold, not soft, just a fact. Kyle didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the blank ceiling tile. I got the call because my name was still in your file, she continued, still listed under next of kin. Still nothing. A faint tension worked its way across his jaw, but he didn't speak. Deb exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that had once held grief. Now it held only space. I'm going to fix that, she said. The nurse will remove me. Someone else can take that place if they ever show up. Kyle finally blinked. Still no eye contact. Just the quiet, rigid knowledge that she was no longer the one who would catch him. You made your choices, Deb said, more gently than she expected. And so did I. She turned without waiting for a reply. At the nurse's station, she spoke clearly. I'd like to be removed as emergency contact for Kyle Monroe, immediately. The nurse hesitated. You sure? Yes. The paperwork was short. 1 page, a few initials, a signature. When she handed it back, the nurse said, You're still allowed to be here. You know that, right? I don't need to be, Deb said. Not anymore. By the time she stepped out into the parking lot, the snow was falling sideways in thick, wind-driven waves. The world felt wrapped in cotton, visibility low, trees blurred and soft. She pulled up her hood, buttoned her coat, and kept walking through it. The cold kissed her cheeks, bit her ears, but something in her felt clean, lighter than it had in years. Angela's car was waiting near the edge of the lot. The engine idled. The windshield wipers worked slow and steady. When Deb opened the passenger door, the smell of cinnamon and chocolate hit her first. Angela handed her a travel mug without a word. They sat there in silence, snow tapping gently against the roof. Deb held the cocoa in both hands, the warmth creeping into her fingers like forgiveness. Finally, she whispered, He made his choices. Angela nodded once. And you made yours. They sat like that for a while, watching the storm erase the tire tracks behind them. Back at home, the paint cans waited unopened in the hallway. The room wasn't sky blue yet, but it would be. And for the first time, Deb didn't picture who used to live in it. She pictured what it could become. A study, a guest room, a sanctuary, a space no longer ruled by absence. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She didn't check it. Just let it ring. The house was quiet in the way only healed things can be. No creaks overhead. No doors left ajar. No echo of boots in the hallway or raised voices buried in drywall. Just the soft hiss of the radiator warming the kitchen and the slow, contented drip of coffee finishing its cycle. Deb stood barefoot on the tile, mug in hand, steam curling past her cheek. She didn't sip it right away. Just held the warmth and listened to the stillness she'd fought for. Outside, the snow had crusted over, a fine layer of frost glittering across the lawn. No footsteps, no tire tracks. Just white, clean. She walked past the living room and into what used to be Kyle's room. The walls were now a bright, soft sky blue. Not a trace of thumbtack holes or dents remained. Angela had insisted on satin finish, so it reflects light, not memories. Sun poured through the clean window, casting square patches of morning glow across the pale wood floor. The bed was made, crisp white linens, new throw pillows, a folded blanket at the foot. A single framed photo sat on the dresser, a landscape from their last road trip, long before things turned. The room didn't ache anymore. It breathed. A guest room. A future room. Deb leaned against the doorframe, sipping her coffee now, and let the warmth settle into her bones. Angela arrived just after 10, holding a spare key in one hand and a bakery bag in the other. You need backup banana bread, she said, stepping inside without knocking. Also, she held up the key. Just in case. Deb took it without argument. Angela leaned against the counter, watching her. You sleep okay? I did, Deb said, then smiled. Better than I have in years. Angela grinned. Told you sky blue was a healing color. Later that week, Deb drove across town and parked outside the family shelter. She didn't go in, didn't need to. She walked up to the front desk, handed the clerk a white envelope with only the words, monthly, anonymous written on the front. It wasn't penance. It wasn't guilt. It was acknowledgement. Of all the women still inside the storm, still trying to build ladders out of shattered furniture, Deb had found her way out. That was enough. The invitation came in an email with no fanfare, no pressure. A local mom group, the same one that used to make her feel like an imposter at PTA meetings, had heard through Angela that Deb had been through it. Would she be willing to speak next month? Just a few words. Nothing formal. The subject line read, "Your strength matters." Deb didn't respond right away. She sat with it. Let it breathe. Later that night, she replied with a simple line, "Yes, but only if I can tell the truth." On a quiet Friday afternoon, a delivery truck pulled into her driveway. A knock at the door. A brown box. Inside, a bouquet of soft white tulips and eucalyptus, tied with a navy ribbon. The card read, "You rebuilt more than walls." Rachel Deb set the flowers on the dining room table and stepped back. They didn't fill the house with scent. They didn't need to. They just belonged. That evening, Deb locked every door in the house, not out of fear, not because of threats or noise or things that might be lurking outside, but because she could. Because they were hers. Front door, back door, garage, side gate. She walked through the house afterward, lights low, feet bare against the warm wood floor, no tension in her shoulders. No folder labeled "Next" waiting on the desk, no bat by the door. Only peace. She paused at the guest room again. The walls glowed soft blue in the dim light. Angela had added a candle to the nightstand. Mark had offered to build a bookshelf. The door was open. Not waiting, just welcoming. Her phone buzzed in the other room. She didn't rush to it. She didn't need to. When she finally checked it, it was just a weather alert. Snowstorm advisory. Nothing personal. She smiled, hung the spare key Angela had given her on a small hook beside the door, then whispered, just for herself, "He lost his key. I found my peace."